let's get into the NHL draft from Monday night. Shock the world, which takes us to betonline.ag. When we talk about, how about this? You want coaching odds for the Anaheim Ducks, Pittsburgh Penguins, or Seattle Kraken? How about this? Joe Quenneville, the odds-on favorite. And you guys at RG have been on that for a little bit. You, Jimmy Murphy, and others have been talking about Joe Quenneville. Would you be comfortable plus 150, Joe Q in Anaheim? You agree with the odds on there?
I was more confident about it a week ago.
Yeah.
I think the fan backlash has really affected Pat Verbeek.
Ooh, is there Jay Woodcroft, David Carl, Pascal Vincent?
David Carl's off the table.
Okay. Pascal Vincent plus 1,200? He's going to be a hot commodity, especially if they win the Calder, eh?
I wouldn't venture there.
So you got Rick Tocchet, odds-on favorite to go back to Philadelphia, minus 110, according to odds makers at BetOnline.
I definitely see that.
.ag. That's Marco D'Amico. Follow him at MN D'Amico. Let's get into the NHL draft on Monday night, where the New York Islanders had a 3% chance, and they won the lottery. My question immediately to you is this, because I have my own point of view, and I'm curious what yours is. I've interpreted the Islanders as winning the lottery as good news for the Canadiens. What do you think about that?
I don't.
Okay. You want to give reasoning?
Sure.
Okay. So Jeff Gordon on Monday talking about RFAs. They're going to look. The RFA list is uber sexy. Oh, so many beautiful, interesting names. On that list is Noah Dobson of the New York Islanders. And you've been very consistent, and you've made this point from the early winter months when you told us on this channel that as long as Grandpa Lou is running the Islanders, they're never going to rebuild. Grandpa Lou is no longer there. We don't know who's going to be making moves on the island just yet. But in my peewee brain, I associate them winning the lottery with saying, okay, we've picked a lane. We're drafting first overall. And if my new boss comes in and says, you guys 25 or older making $8 million a year, no, you're open. I think this maybe lends itself to a path where Jeff Gordon, Ken Hughes can work together and say, yeah, maybe Matthew Barzal, maybe Noah Dobson, maybe they can be had. So walk me through why you disagree.
Without being disrespectful to Matthew Schaefer or Michael Misa, you're not drafting Connor Bedard.
Right.
You're not drafting Macklin Celebrini.
Right.
You may be getting a top pair defenseman or a potential first line center. Right. And that's fantastic to get. Yeah. But last year's draft, you were able to get that, 6th, 7th, 8th overall, not first, second. You know what I'm saying? So
yes,
like someone asked me, and I gave my opinion, and then I went and pulled a couple of scouts and I got their opinion. Someone asked me, is there a player in this draft that you would take over Ivan Demidov? And I said no.
Okay. Right.
And I reached out to a couple of scouts. They all said no. So winning the first overall pick is massive for the Islanders because their prospect pool desperately needs an influx of youth. I mean, it was inevitable that it was going to be this year or next year. They were going to finish low. And so picking up a guy like Cole Eiserman last year, trading for a guy like Cal Ritchie this year, what a move. And then getting the first overall pick. The Islanders are well positioned to retool on the fly the same way that the Canadiens did, in 2018. So that brings me to who the Islanders are interviewing for their general manager role.
Okay.
One, Marc Bergevin.
I thought he'd stay in LA because Rob Blake's gone in LA now, so I thought Bergevin would slide right into there.
No, if I'm LA, I flip it. I don't bring in anybody from the old administration. I flip it. I go and try to bring somebody else.
Okay.
And that's going to open up other questions for one Quinton Byfield, but we'll get into that in the summer. So when you look at a player like Schaefer, like Misa, I just feel like what Lou leaving to me was the more of the good news. Matthew Schaefer plays on the left side on defense. Noah Dobson plays on the right.
Yeah.
And then you have, what happens if, because this is the other thing, right? If do they keep the pick? Are they getting the value of a first overall pick with that pick? And then the Canadiens kind of had the same discussion in 2022, where is it more valuable for them to trade down to 3 or 4 or 5, have one of the teams there overpay for Schaefer, who's far and beyond the best defenseman in this draft? Like, it is a wide gap, right? Like it's insanely wide. It's the same kind of gap that one could have, argued existed between Macklin Celebrini and the next true blue center in the draft. Because I don't think necessarily that Caden Lindstrom is going to be a center full time.
Gotcha.
So a team may want to overpay just because it's so attainable and the team could be interested. And at the same time, the Islanders could trade down, get additional assets, because the teams in the 4 to 5 to 6 range have multiple first round picks in this draft, and still pick their guy, like a hometown kid like James Higgins, who's from the island, right? Or Caleb Desnoyers, who's rising because of a great, or Anton Frendel, who is a great two-way play. Like, it depends on where the Islanders want to take this, because I don't think any of those guys are necessarily going to be difference makers in the NHL next year either. So is this going to be, like you said, could it be a transition year where it sparks it, where they say, we're entering a retool, Noah Dobson's asking for too much.
Yeah.
We're going to try and look for a trade, recoup some assets, bring in some youth that could play right away. And I think the Canadiens have a couple of elements that can play in the NHL right away as of next year.
Sure. But so if I stop you there then, before we get into the Canadiens and their 2 first-round picks, how much pressure is on Reinbacher and Logan Mailloux on a hopeful deep run for the Laval Rocket in pursuit of a Calder Trophy here? As we've spoken about, you and I, several times, about David Savard's retirement. It opens up a slot. Who plays there? Trying to get your defensemen on their strong sides and not playing on the opposite side here to get that nice mix and match here. How do you see the battle between Reinbacher and Mailloux? Who needs to show management more in the AHL playoff run? To your point about, the Canadiens looking at maybe a team like the Islanders and trying to find someone there that could help bolster the Canadiens' defensive line.
Ideally, both.
I agree. I want Mailloux. I believe more in Reinbacher, but I think the fan in me, the observer in me that watches the Canadiens, I think the Canadiens need Logan Mailloux to hit more than Reinbacher, if you know what I'm saying. I think Logan Mailloux is the bigger bleep hole that the Canadiens are maybe missing a little bit.
To a degree, yes. But I think the value is in the position that he has and the potential offense that he can bring.
Yes.
I think that would be extremely valuable for a team, looking to start a retool of sorts, where they get a mobile, big, top 4 right shot defenseman. I feel like the Canadiens, if you're already going to have a guy like Lane Hutson on your team, then maybe a guy like Logan Mailloux then becomes kind of expendable in that situation. But they don't have a player that can do what David Reinbacher does outside of maybe Caden Gooley.
Yeah.
So yeah. I like the combination of styles, as Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton put it. But what I would say is, if the Canadiens turn around, because this is the thing, you bring up the Islanders, for example, RFAs, and this is like straight up trade. I'm not even getting into the offer sheet stuff. We'll cover that another day. Yeah. But if you look at a guy like Noah Dobson, it's going to be expensive to retain him. Like, the only reason the Islanders would be moving Noah Dobson is because they don't want to commit to the money that he's asking. He's probably and rightfully going to be asking for somewhere in the same range that Jacob Chychrun signed for at $9 million. Yeah. Right. So if that's the case, you bet, Canadians fans are worried that Lane Hutson is going to make more than Nick Suzuki on his next deal. Well, Jesus, what do you think of Noah Dobson's going to do?
Exactly.
So the only reason that the Islanders would trade him is because that contract talks fell through, right? Because the thing that they were looking for was to bring in a number 1 center and they were going to use Dobson as like the main piece for that. That was when Lou was in charge. Now, if they decide to go on a little bit of a retool, trading away their number one defenseman isn't a retool, it's a rebuild.
Fair.
And I think
fair.
that's the thing. Like they would have to, like it would be a full teardown, and like they would basically have to say like we're going to be back soon and we're going to build our defense around Schaefer, but they're going to need other pieces on defense.
Mm-hmm.
And I would bet my bottom dollar that they would ask for Ryan Backer if those discussions were to happen, and the Canadiens would probably push for a guy like Mailloux. But again, I know that the Canadiens have shown interest in the past in Dobson. The only thing I'm going to tell you is it's so premature to have these conversations before a GM is even brought in.
Oh, yeah.
And I think
Oh, yeah.
the longer it takes for a GM to be brought in, the less and less likely the Islanders will be in a dealing position, which, given the fact that they have the first overall pick now, that may actually hasten the process.
Well, totally. To your point, like they don't have a GM. It's early May. There's so much runway left on this tarmac here.
Yeah, but you got to get into scouting meetings. You got to get into trade talks. You got to you have to have a GM in place. My 2 cents. You have to have a GM in place by the combine.
Well said. And the Montreal Canadiens have their GM in place, and Ken Hughes, and you heard him along with his EVP Jeff Gordon hold court at Place Bell on Monday afternoon, or early Monday morning, I should say, which takes us down the path of what we think the Canadiens should do at the draft this summer. It's locked in. Pick 16 and 17 is what they own going into the first round. What would you like to see them do? Would you like to see them be very aggressive and shop them, or would you like to see exploration on who is available on the board here? How do you see the viable strategy playing out by the draft?
Both. I like both, and it's such a cop-out answer, but I'll explain why. When you get like I'll give you a direct, connotation example, okay? You get to a point in a season where you start looking at the draft. You don't have as many notable names. You're like, looks kind of weak this year, which is what mainly a lot of people said about this year, because there's no generational star and there's a little bit of a talent drop off outside the top 10.
Right.
Okay, that's fine. That's what they said about 2022. Don't think anybody's complaining right now. So we're going through the process of evaluating talent. You evaluate talent, and all of a sudden you start seeing guys that elevate as the season gets tougher, and elimination settings, playoffs, tournaments. The U18s just happened, and then there are names that you didn't really think were in contention for a top 10 spot that are now all of a sudden on everybody's top 10 list. I think about guys like Brady Martin, who's just a wrecking ball everywhere. You think about, Roger McQueen coming back from health, that takes the conversation another way. A Jake O'Brien, so all of these guys that we're going to dive into a little later, in the month, all these guys are now pushing for the top 10, creating more of a top 13, top 14, top 15. After the first and second tier of the draft is done. So from like 5 to 15, you're kind of starting to get like that kind of a tier. I think when you get into the combines, that's when GMs and scouting teams fall in love with players. And then you get to the draft, and there are back channel deals where, if this player is still available at your rank, then, what do you want? And this and that. We saw it to a degree prior to the draft. We saw the Canadiens trade up. We saw the Islanders trade down with the Chicago Blackhawks last year. But we didn't see hockey deals for first-round picks, right? Yeah. We didn't really see that. And so I think that's the key difference here, is that with the cap going up, with draft collateral being available, the only problem is going to be who is going to be willing to move a pick and who won't. And I think that's the key, right? So you look at, for example, the New York Rangers are picking 12th, I believe, or 13th, one of the two.
12th.
At 12th. Yeah. So I would be very comfortable saying that they're going to shop that pick.
Yeah.
Pretty comfortable.
Yeah, I'm the Rangers to me, and I know I want to get into this with you in future episodes, but the Rangers are, I find, fascinating
Oh yeah,
to
absolutely,
watch what
absolutely.
is going to happen. But like, so the Islanders pick first, San Jose's next, Chicago is third. I mean, Utah picking fourth. Let's
I love
wrap
the
this part
chaos.
up. Yeah, no kidding. The chaos is crazy. Like, who got jobbed, and who's the team to watch in the draft as far as you're concerned today? I know it's a tough question in early May, but who gets jobbed and
I,
who are we watching?
I think the most interesting pick in this draft is going to be a third overall. Chicago
Chicago.
Blackhawks, right?
Right.
I
Yeah.
think, I think everyone's kind of agreed, give or take, on who the top two should be.
Yeah.
And then there's
Then it's on.
3 to 5,
Right.
3 to 6. I think the most fascinating pick, I think the most fascinating pick is probably going to be, I would have to say Anaheim at 10. Anaheim has everything
Yeah.
except for a right shot defenseman.
Maybe they'll lose Mason McTavish to RFA. I don't know. Maybe the Canadiens will go
See,
get him.
that's the thing. As
Yeah.
lose him how? They have like $40 million to spend.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Like your offer sheet has to be
Well, you
so
say
out of
40
this
million.
world.
That's the cap, though. What about their internal cap?
Yeah, I know, but there's also a salary cap floor.
Yes.
So they have to spend to a minimum, and they're 10 mil under that right now. So
Okay.
so they have to, right? They may be a team that, I don't know, that may trade for a LTII contract with 1 year left that doesn't have any money to be spent.
Who's that?
Maybe. Oh, I don't know.
Me neither.
But the Mason McTavish is a no-brainer for them to retain. So from an
Yeah,
offer
I
sheet
agree.
perspective, yeah, he's not a guy that I would worry about in any
Right.
way, shape, or form.
Well, to me, it makes
You're
as
going to
much
have to
sense. I mean,
blow it.
Quentin
He makes
Byfield's
as much
name
sense on
too.
paper. Yeah, but he
Yes.
makes as much sense on paper, right? So
Yes.
like that's a different story. So when you
Right.
look at, teams to watch, I think Anaheim may be a team that could say, you know what, there's no, we don't have a specific need here. We've basically filled all our needs, and the one we're looking for is a right shot defenseman. They may dangle that 10th overall pick. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there, because they may be done trying to pick, and they may want to start adding pieces to their lineup that can help them right away, because ownership is getting a little annoyed at how long this is taking.
My Nashville side picking 5th overall, by the way.
Yeah, and I feel like
Nashville.
Nashville is, if you're starting a rebuild or you want to retool quickly,
Yeah.
Schaefer's already off the bet. It's too early to draft a guy like Murtka. I'd see them just going for a center at that point. And it really depends on who's going to be left. But again, a James Higgins, Anton Frundell, those kind of guys, Caleb Dinwiddie.
Sure.
Nashville doesn't shy away from drafting in the queue. So it's there are definitely options for them. The one thing I will say at the end of the day, when it comes to this draft and the volatility of it, is it's going to be as volatile as 2022 was.
That's fair.
Where you didn't know who was going first, second, third, fourth, fifth. No one knew.
I know. That's Marco D'Amico. Yeah, go ahead. Finish your thought.
But volatility in a draft,
I could see it.
Is a buyer's best friend, or sorry, a seller's best friend when it comes to draft capital, because sometimes you just didn't think that this player would be there at that point. And the Canadiens, for example, if a smaller player drops and the Canadiens are looking to get bigger, then they may not value that player as much as the other team.
Yeah.
But if the other team really likes him and are willing to pay for him, well, then at that point, the cost opportunity increases and you're better off making the trade. And especially when you're picking back to back, you now have the luxury of falling back and picking 17th or trading the 16th pick, and then, or flip flop. But at the end of the day, you control 2 slots back to back in the first round. There's power in that.
Marco D'Amico with RG Media, and always here on youtube.com with Shaun Starr. Thanks for the time. Great stuff as always. And looking forward to next week, where we're going to have a whole new batch of content and really dig in on some very important talking points. Marco, thank you, sir.
Always a pleasure. Enjoy the week, guys.